Kanakalaye. Ito Narasimha Pato Narasimha. Simha. Yato Yato Yami Tato Narasimha. Bahir Narasimha. Hidaye Narasimha. Narasimhamadim Sharanam Prapadev. Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanuvringam Keshavagrita Narahari Rupa Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare. Keshavagrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare. Jaya Narsimhadev, Jaya Narsimhadev, Narsimhadev, Jaya Narsimhadev. Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya.
विघ्न विनाश नरसिंह भगवान की, भक्त शिरोमणि प्रहलाद महाराज की, गौर प्रेमानंदे। Please move forward. Mataji and Prabhu. Thank you.
If someone's gonna play Mridanga, I can just play cartels. It's okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Prabhuji. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Haribol, 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 Nitai Gora, Haribol. Nitai Gora, Premanande, Haribol. Hare Krishna. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And tonight we will be reading from chapter number 8, text number 5. This chapter is entitled Attaining the Supreme. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Antyakale cha mammeva Smaran Muktva Kalevaram Yaha Prayati Samadbhavam Yatti Nastyatra Samshayaha. Anyone like to chant the verse? Antakale cha mammeva Smaran Muktva Kalevaram Ya Prayati Samadbhavam Yati Nastyatra Samshayaha. Antakale cha mammeva Smaran Muktva Kalevaram Ya Prayati Samadbhavam Yati Nastyatra Samshayaha. Antakale cha mameva Smaran Muktva Kalevaram Ya Prayati Samadbhavam Yati Nastyatra Samshayaha. Antakale cha mameva Smaran Muktva Kalevaram Ya Prayati Samadbhavam Yati Nastyatra Samshayaha. Antakale cha mameva Smaran Muktva Kalevaram Ya Prayati Samadbhavam Yati Nastyatra Samshayaha. Antakale cha mameva Smaran Muktva Kalevaram Ya Prayati Samadbhavam Yati Nastyatra Samshayaha. Thank you. Antakale at the end of life. Cha, also. Mam, me, eva, certainly. Smaran, remembering. Muktva, quitting. Kalevaram, the body. Yaha, he who. Prayati, goes. Saha, he. Matbhavam, my nature. Yati, achieves. Na, not. Asti, there is. Atra, here. Samshayaha, doubt. Okay. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Purport. In this verse, the importance of Krishna consciousness is stressed. Anyone who quits his body in Krishna consciousness is at once transferred to the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is the purest of the pure. And therefore, anyone who is constantly Krishna conscious is also the purest of the pure. The word smaran, remembering, is important. Remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life. If one wants to achieve success at the end of his life, the process of remembering Krishna is essential. Therefore, one should constantly, incessantly chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Lord Chaitanya has advised that one be as tolerant as a tree, taror api sahishnuna. There may be so many impediments for a person who is chanting Hare Krishna. Nonetheless, tolerating all these impediments, one should continue to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So at the end of one's life, one can have the full benefit of Krishna consciousness. So we'll offer some invocation prayers to seek the blessings of their lordships, of our Guru Parampara, of Srila Prabhupada, of all the devotees. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. So I'd like to just begin by requesting the blessings of all of the devotees, that we can have an uplifting, meaningful discussion, Bhagavad Gita, something that can inspire us and something that can be pleasing to our spiritual masters, to Srila Prabhupada, and ultimately to the Supreme Lord. Okay, so in this verse, Krishna is sharing that whoever at the end of life remembers him, by that remembrance, they will attain his nature. And he says, of this, there is no doubt. So it's a deeply encouraging statement that Krishna is making to Arjuna. He's sharing that if one is able to cultivate this type of remembrance at the end of one's life, that they will be with Krishna. So on one hand, we can say that this is a very encouraging statement. On another hand, we can say that it's quite a challenging prospect for us, especially in this material world in Kali Yuga. Mind is flickering. Krishna says it's more difficult to control than the wind. So in this way, on paper, it's simple. We just have to remember Krishna at the end of life, and then we'll be with him. So, but in our experience, we can say that our mind tends to go, speaking from my own mind, our minds tend to go here, there, and everywhere. And we don't necessarily have this fixed, constant remembrance of Krishna. And of course, we understand that at the end of life, circumstances are often quite difficult. So for us to cultivate this remembrance of Krishna at the end of life is, as they would say, a tall order. It's something that is quite difficult. But how does it happen? What are our first steps in this direction? So we can say that we have to cultivate remembrance of Krishna in this very life on a day-to-day basis. Not that we just suddenly, we live our life, in the way that it goes, and then at the end of life, suddenly, boom, laser focus, remembering Krishna. That's not how it's explained by Srila Prabhupada and by our teachers. What we are trying to cultivate is a remembrance of Krishna that becomes natural for us, because ultimately for the soul, it is natural. It is the nature of the soul to connect to the Supreme. But due to our various types of conditioning, it may be easier for us to remember things of this world in the day-to-day sense. But as we continue to move along in Krishna consciousness, connect with devotees who are in that space where they are remembering Krishna like second nature, they're going through their life in a remembrance of Krishna. This is how we come to a place of remembering. And of course, the 9 processes of bhakti are there explained, beginning with Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. So they're considered to happen in this order, at least, when we hear about Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. So we begin by hearing. We begin by hearing Kirtan, hearing the holy name, hearing the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, hearing the words of Krishna. And then from there, there's Kirtanam. There's chanting. Chanting is inspired by what we hear. And also sharing in this way, reading is considered to be a form of kirtan as well, because we're glorifying the Lord in this way. And ultimately, this leads to Vishnu Smaranam, remembrance of the Supreme Lord. So cultivating this remembrance is something that's a life's work for us, perhaps many lifetimes, we can say. And Srila Prabhupada explained it as life's final exam. He said that just like a student is going through their studies, they have a day-to-day practice of studying, of reading, of hearing, of remembering. And then finally, at the end of that course, they're put to the test in such a way that, how did you do? How did you remember? How did you cultivate this knowledge? So, of course, we've all experienced, what it's like to cram for an exam. Maybe some have done that. It can work, we can say, but it's a very stressful kind of experience, and it's not really natural. Much better that we are focused on the study, we're focused on the material as it comes, and then in that way we naturally have the quality of remembrance that when the exam comes, we are in a space to share what we've been given and what we've remembered. So in this way, we have so many great opportunities in Krishna consciousness for Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, hearing, chanting, remembering the Lord. But it's our own journey. And so we can talk about how, you know, this final exam is built upon our own spiritual practices, but it's also in many ways built upon mercy that we receive, the knowledge that we receive, and this gyan, this knowledge that we're receiving, moving into vigyan, into realization. This is kind of a transference that happens on the spiritual path, that we receive many good ideas. We receive a lot of spiritual knowledge by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, by the mercy of great devotees. We receive spiritual knowledge. But for that to really take root in the heart is realization, is vigyan. So we can say that the knowledge kind of moves from head into heart. Of course, spiritual knowledge touches our heart immediately. It touches the soul immediately. But in our conditioned state, we may take it as book knowledge in a certain way. And Srila Prabhupada explains many times that there are academic scholars who may be very, very well versed in the scriptures. There may be a scholar who can repeat the entire Bhagavad Gita. But if there's not that movement from gyan to vigyan, moving from knowledge to realization, head to heart, ultimately touching the soul, then that will not have the same effect. Auspicious, no doubt, but not the same effect of really taking root and influencing the way that we see, the way that we remember Krishna in our day-to-day experience. So we may ask, why in Bhagavad Gita, why in our teachings, why is there so much talk about death? Sometimes people will say, oh, Hare Krishnas are very morbid. They're always talking about death. What is that? We want to live. We want to have a great experience, you know, in life. So that's also there. That's also there. Srila Prabhupada was asked one time. He gave many examples different times, but someone asked him, what is the purpose of life? And in times he says to recover our lost relationship with Krishna, so on and so forth. But one of the interviewers, Prabhupada was very expert at just responding exactly to the sensibility of the person who was speaking to him, and therefore kind of really touching upon something, surprising them. So someone said to Prabhupada, what is the purpose of life? And he said, to enjoy. So in this way, we can say that it's not that we don't want to enjoy life, but we want to enjoy life through remembering Krishna, through engaging in all of these joyful processes of Krishna consciousness, coming together with devotees. So anyway, this morbid kind of sense that people may get, this remembrance of death actually can help us to have a brighter, more meaningful life. Because a lot of times we find that we're in denial. We're in denial of our own mortality. And then a time comes, quite often we hear about the proverbial midlife crisis, when people all of a sudden realize that they're facing mortality. And it manifests in so many strange ways, right? People may make drastic shifts in their life. In the Western world, for whatever reason, the cliche is that someone goes out and buys a sports car. You know, there's so many ways that we respond to these very complex feelings that come up within us when we consider mortality. So by just having a sober understanding of the way life in this material world works, the fact that this life is temporary, that can actually help us to lean more into what really matters, to lean more into, we can say, our project of cultivating remembrance of Krishna, of living a life of the soul. Because as we know, the material body is temporary, but the spirit, the soul, is eternal. So if we can live in such a way that we are focused more on what gives nourishment to the soul, then that fear of death also naturally is addressed. It may be a gradual process, no doubt, but that fear of death is addressed. And so it's not a question of being morbid, it's a question of being sober and having some sense of what is most important, what is most significant in life. So, and also not that we immediately transcend, okay, the body is temporary, so I'm just completely transcendental now. We have our nature, we have our path, but we just at least remember prayojana, we remember what the goal is, we remember what the objective of our practice is. So when we're doing our sadhana day to day, this is a very important way of remembering Krishna so that it becomes naturally at the end of life. Srila Bhakti Tirtha Swami, he gave a beautiful lecture series and also wrote a book called Die Before Dying. So very interesting. What Maharaj was sharing, summarized, I recommend for anyone to listen to it because it's so beautiful, so meaningful. But just to summarize this point, die before dying means that there are certain parts of us, the Sanskrit word would be upadis. There are certain identifications that we have. Oh, I'm of this nationality. Oh, I do this for work. I'm in this position in my company. I'm in this position in family, everything like that. It's not that we let those go and try to go to be a sadhu in the Himalayas somewhere, something like that. It's not like that, but also that we recognize these are temporary designations. And not that I need to artificially pull away from those, but at the same time, I need to recognize that those designations will not always be with me. Those designations will not always define who I am. So while I'm existing in this place and living this life with these designations, I also want to cultivate understanding and make contact with that reality of who I always will be, even after these temporary designations have faded. So Bhakti Tirtha Swami gives this wonderful just mantra, die before dying. It's very amazing. And he shared those lectures when he was nearing the end of his life in this world. So this focus of the end of life also helps us to remember the value of human life, how valuable, how meaningful our life in the human body can be. And Srila Prabhupada stresses many times the value of human life, that we don't want to waste it. So what is special about human life? What's unique about human life? So of course, all living beings have consciousness. The plants have consciousness, the animals have consciousness to varying degrees. But human beings have we've been gifted with a certain degree of consciousness that we're not only conscious, but we're conscious of being conscious. We have an understanding that there's some value here, that I can look more deeply into the meaning of my life, of who I am, who is God, what is our purpose in this world. So that's something that only human beings have the opportunity to explore. You may see a dog being very happy in life, and surely they're full of life. They're spirit souls also, but you won't see a dog, sitting there pondering, having some existential crisis or wondering about what the purpose of life is. It's just not their nature. They haven't been equipped in that way. So this human birth is considered to be extremely precious because we have been equipped with this ability to look more deeply into what the significance of life is, what our purpose is, and ultimately to develop loving relationship with the Supreme Lord. So Krishna also explains in Bhagavad Gita that he is time. He is time. And in many ways, we can say that death is a manifestation of time. Krishna says, I am time, destroyer of worlds. Sometimes that's translated also as I am death. And so Krishna actually meets each and every one of us in this form of time or of death. So even those who consider themselves agnostic or atheists, who don't consider themselves to have a particular faith, the scriptures explain, Krishna explains himself in Bhagavad Gita, that at the time of death, we actually all meet Krishna. We all meet Krishna in some form or another. So in this way, we can say that death is something that can be also very auspicious and very beautiful and very meaningful. It's not something that we hear very much in our culture. In our culture, usually death is tucked away, hidden away. Especially in the Western world, we find that death is not discussed very much, and it's hidden away in hospitals for the most part. But most of you are coming from India. In my experiences in India also, you see that death is just a little bit more visible. And in other cultures, it's more talked about, it's more visible. So in this way, by having a healthy understanding of end of life, of what death can be, we don't have to fear it as much, because we can see that by the mercy of Krishna, by the mercy of the devotees, it can actually be something incredibly auspicious. It's this, as Prabhupada says, it's this life's final exam. It's a culmination of all that we've offered, all that we've tried to offer. There's a prayer that sometimes is said at the end of doing some deity worship. Mantrahinam kriyahinam bhaktihinam janardana. Basically, the gist of this prayer is that whatever I've offered in this life, Lord, whatever I've been able to offer with devotion, please accept that. And whatever I failed to do, whatever I did improperly or without the proper consciousness, please make that complete. So for a devotee at the end of their life, this is their mood. This is their mood. Whatever I've offered, whatever I've been able to give in this life, whatever was done with devotion, please accept it. And whatever my shortcomings are, please make that complete. He says in Bhagavad Gita, Ananyas Chintayanto Mam. He says he preserves what we have and carries what we lack. So for devotees at the end of life, that's their prayer. And how do we cultivate that mood? Again, it's from our day-to-day practice, but also the devotees are very merciful. We see in community, we have the opportunity to do this. We have the opportunity to accompany each other when devotees become ill or when devotees are at the end of their life. We may have the opportunity to be with them there, to chant Hare Krishna, to read with them. This is a very beautiful service. Heard something in Bhaktivedanta Manor in England. They have one program that they call Kirtan on Call. Just means that whenever there's a crisis, whenever there's someone who may be leaving their body, maybe leaving the world, they have a group of devotees as volunteers who join with them at the end of life and chant and be with them and cultivate that atmosphere of remembrance of Krishna. So we have many opportunities in community to serve each other in this very, yes, challenging, but also very sacred time of life. And we hear that phrase many times that it's a popular saying that death is a part of life. So in that way, why not also have a mood of celebration, of coming together as a community? Although for us, those who are left behind when someone passes away, it's very challenging. We have grief. But for those who are leaving, we can feel happy for them, that they're coming closer to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. So Krishna says that he is death. And we see many times that those who maybe did not have such a spiritually focused life, sometimes they do receive this gift where at the end of their life, they start to contemplate, they start to think more deeply, they start to try to reach for their connection to God. We see this many times. So certainly that there's that power, there's that potency of Krishna coming in that form to someone. So we understand that detachment is something that's sometimes prioritized on the spiritual path, prioritized in different spiritual paths. Some are very much focused on this vairagya, giving things up. In our Krishna consciousness movement, that is not so much the focus. Yes, we do give certain things up, but we give things up by becoming attached to something higher, to becoming attached to the higher taste. Just like if you have a small child, they're playing with the toy, or they're attached to some toy. Sometimes if you show up with something else, something more interesting for them, they'll immediately drop that toy. So in that way, we're trying to give ourselves the opportunity to become attached to these beautiful processes, to be attached to all of the good ideas, all of the beautiful processes, all of the mercy that Srila Prabhupada has given to us. That in that way, by this attachment, we gradually become detached from the things that we may cling to in our lives. And so detachment doesn't come right at the time of death. For some, it does. We can say that's the difficult way, right? That at the time of death, there's a lot we have to give up, whether we like to or not. We are faced with that reality. So for those who are able to just have a healthy understanding of some detachment or some at least perspective that this time will come, that that enables us to focus more on what is most important, what really matters, to focus on remembrance of Krishna. So in our bhakti tradition, we emphasize attachment, actually more than detachment. We don't try to artificially become detached. Oh, I'll just let go of everything today. I'll just go walk through the streets with one set of clothing and give up all of my friends and family. That's not our tradition at all. Our tradition is that we become attached gradually to Krishna through his devotees. And in that way, that colors every aspect of our life. We don't have to give up who we are. We don't have to give up what we appreciate in life. We just try to make it an offering to Krishna. So if you're a family person, you raise your family in remembrance of Krishna. You try to inspire each other in serving Krishna. And if you're an artist, you make art in such a way that you can offer that to Krishna. If you're a cook, you cook for Krishna. So many beautiful ways to integrate who we are. If you do business, they say that, everyone works to put a roof over their head. But what you do underneath that roof plays a very big role. So we all working to put a roof over our head. But what's going on underneath that roof, that determines whether or not we can make our work an offering to Krishna. Because if we're facilitating our home in such a way that we're just guests in the home, Krishna is, the proprietor of that home, and we're trying to use our home as like in Vastu, in the science of Vastu, they said that the home is like a power station, that if you go home, that's where you're recharging emotionally, physically, spiritually. So if you have your home as your spiritual power station, where you're going to become inspired so that you can go out into the world and serve and connect with people in meaningful ways, then your work, there's not a question of it being something materialistic. There's not a question of it being separate from Krishna. So in this way, there's always a way to offer who we are and what we do to Krishna. So that's how we cultivate that gradual attachment. And in that way, if we're serving steadily, if we're serving in that remembrance of Krishna throughout our life, whatever the circumstance it may be, Krishna says, whatever you eat, whatever you do, whatever you offer, whatever you give away in charity, whatever austerities you perform. And under that category of austerities may be very, very difficult, trying situations in our lives. But Krishna says, do all of these things as an offering to me. So in that way, if we're trying to cultivate that consciousness, if we're trying to practice that whatever circumstance we're passing through in our life, we're trying to do it in remembrance of Krishna. We're trying to do it as an offering to Krishna. Then at the time of death, what difference is there? Srila Prabhupada gives a very funny analogy that he says that for one who is already in the state of pure devotion, at the time of death, the shedding of the body, he said, is like when a drunk man doesn't realize whether or not he's wearing his shirt. So it's like that way. So in other words, if we're focused on devotional service, fully absorbed in devotional service at the end of our life here in this world, we just move from devotional service to devotional service. And the shedding of the body is just a very incidental moment, because the consciousness is prevailing. And we know that at the end of this life, we bring our consciousness with us. Our consciousness is actually, Krishna says in the next verse in Bhagavad Gita, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So in other words, by our consciousness, we're actually playing a role in forming our next body. We're playing a role in forming our destination, because this happens by the law of nature. So in this way, if we're cultivating this day-to-day remembrance, then it's like just shedding the body and moving forward on this path of devotional service. So for a devotee, death is not fearful. For a devotee, someone asked Srila Prabhupada, what is the quality of someone who has seen Krishna? What is the quality of someone who has remembrance of Krishna? And he said that person will be fearless. And of course, that's the meaning of part of Srila Prabhupada's name. Abhaya Charanaravinda. Abhaya means fearlessness. So Srila Prabhupada perfectly exemplified. And at the time of his passing from this world, such an incredible example. It's very intense for some of us to see this. There's footage of Srila Prabhupada when he was leaving the world. And it's very intense, it's very sobering, but at the same time, it's so inspiring, it's so glorious, because he's dictating his translations, even when he's, on what would be called his deathbed. For a transcendental personality like Srila Prabhupada, we know there's no question of death in a mundane sense. But at the end of his life, he was translating, and he was continuing in his service. So for him, what's the question of death? And he also was very sober in reminding his disciples. He said, don't think that this won't happen to you. So for all of us, we have that remembrance, but it doesn't have to be something morbid. It's just a reminder that as we go through life, we try to remember that this life in material world is temporary, and we can have the most meaningful experience, both in this life and at the end of life. We can enjoy this life more, actually, by remembering that we ultimately will leave this world and we move forward and try to cultivate that constant connection to Krishna, because that's what we'll have with us. So they say you can't take it with you, the material things. So we try to couch everything and center everything on our connection to Krishna. So thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We'll stop here and just leave some space for reflections, discussion, questions, anything anyone would like to share. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhuji.
And this was the time of death comes to me. Can I say that suffering devotee, Krishna, even whatever the circumstances, Krishna will help us remember the time of death?
Yes. I'll just repeat your question so everyone can hear. Prabhuji was asking a really nice question. He was saying that in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he gives remembrance and forgetfulness. So in this verse, we're hearing that Krishna says one at the end of life who remembers him will attain his nature. So Prabhuji was asking, how does this balance out? And also, can we say that for one who is trying to remember Krishna at the end of life, that Krishna will give that remembrance? So yes, all of this comes from Krishna. Our remembrance of Krishna is not because we have some special brain power or anything like that. It's because Krishna enables us gradually to focus our attention, to become attracted to him, ultimately is what it is. Krishna is all attractive. That's the meaning of Krishna. So Krishna, by how charming and how wonderful he is, by all of his activities, by all of his attributes, he enchants us. He enchants us at least on the deepest level. We may be enchanted temporarily by various things, but on the deepest level, he enchants our hearts. So in that way, the remembrance begins. The remembrance is happening the more and more we're able to become enchanted and attracted to Krishna. And because Krishna is the all-attractive one, he makes it easy for us. If he's not the all-attractive, how can we remember? But he's the all-attractive. So in that way, gradually we can become attracted, and in that way, cultivate remembrance. And I forget who said this. It might have been Radhanath Swami Maharaj. I'm trying to remember who said it exactly, but it was very encouraging. Someone said that at the end of life, if we've truly tried sincerely to remember Krishna, but by some circumstance we're not able to, sometimes we have physical conditions or something that happens, cognitively, things that we're not able always to directly, determinedly remember Krishna. Maharaj said that Krishna remembers us at the end of our life if we've tried sincerely to cultivate remembrance. So that's a very encouraging point. And as far as forgetfulness goes, same thing. Krishna gives us free will. Krishna doesn't want us to artificially, robotically have to love him. That's not pleasing to him at all. He wants us to go through our lives and in that way gradually become inspired within ourselves to form our connection or to explore. The connection's already there, but to explore our connection with him. So he'll allow us that forgetfulness, but it's a temporary forgetfulness because ultimately every soul is reconciled in their connection to the Supreme Lord. But yes, Krishna will help us by his being attractive, by his devotees, by sending so many merciful devotees into our life to help us to remember Krishna. And that's not only in death, that's during our life also. We're blessed to be around devotees who help us to remember Krishna and help us to stay on that path of aspiring to live for Krishna. So devotees come. And in that way, Krishna is also sending us so much mercy and helping us to remember him. Thank you.
We cannot not utilize every day and every hour and every minute, and at the end of life, just become Krishna conscious, right? Like that. Prabhupada's advice that every moment you get, you should utilize that to remember Krishna. And the devotees also are part of that. So the main thing is not to let the moments go by, let the hours go by, or let the days go by. The days are your days that are given to you to do this. Because if you let it go by, then at the end of life, you can't automatically become enlightened. That's all.
Thank you so much for.
So is it, Prabhuji, Hare Krishna, is it possible to become happy at the end of the life? Is it possible to be happy
Yeah.
or satisfied?
Is it possible? So Prabhu asked, yeah, everyone heard, is it possible to become happy or satisfied at the end of one's life? I will say yes to that, because Srila Prabhupada describes the mood of a devotee, one who is in connection to Krishna, one who is a devotee, one who has that remembrance of Krishna. They experience sat. So sat is eternity, chit, knowledge or understanding, and ananda, bliss. And in Krishna consciousness movement, that's the most emphasized of those three, ananda, bliss. So not only at the end of life, but one can experience that if they reach that stage, they can experience it every day in their life. Of course, it's not a cheap thing. It's not an easily attained thing, but we experience glimpses of it in Krishna consciousness. When we're dancing with the devotees, we can feel some joy, some bliss. So that's just, we can say, like a sneak preview. But for one who is in that state of remembrance of Krishna, yes, they will feel very blissful, very joyful, very peaceful, and also very grateful. So gratitude also gives us happiness. So that's so yes, a devotee at the end of life, someone can experience that happiness, that gratitude, that understanding. And we have a great example very recently. His Holiness Kadamba Kanana Swami Maharaj, he left this world and he was in Vrindavan, and his mood was very, very happy, very happy. And those devotees who were with him, they said that he was just in a very special state of being, and he was not afraid. He was already focused on what's to come. And Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj, who did that Die Before Dying series, when his friend Radhanath Swami visited him in the last days of his life, he sat with, and he was very physically ill at this point, and he held hands with Radhanath Swami and he said, "It doesn't get any better than this." So for us, that may be a difficult thing to understand at this moment, but he was in that state. So we see that it is possible. Thank you. Yeah. Jai Prakash Prabhu said that Prabhupada always said, chant and be happy. So chanting brings happiness. Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions, reflections? Very much welcome. Anyone want to share their realizations? Yes, well, Prabhu will bring you the microphone. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. My question is, I'm not too much into Hare Krishna as such, spiritually, but I've heard about the different incarnations of Lord Krishna, right? So my question is, when we spoke about us remembering Krishna at the end of the life, does it mean Krishna in specific, or is Krishna trying to say you remember any of his incarnations? For example, I have a Buddhist friend. Does it mean don't worship Buddha? Does it just have to be Krishna? So I just wanted some clarification on that. Thank you.
That's such a nice question. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you. So yes, Krishna has many incarnations. The principal incarnations are 10, the Das Avatar. So of which one is Lord Buddha. So if you have a Buddhist friend who's remembering Lord Buddha at the end of life, then also that's very, very auspicious. And there's no question that would not be beneficial. That's very beneficial because they're remembering the Supreme Lord in that particular form. And each of us may have a particular form of the Lord that we feel most naturally attracted to. The term in Sanskrit is Ishta Devata. It means the form of the Lord that resides within our heart. So if one, and this applies even to, other faiths, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, so on and so forth. If one is cultivating remembrance of the Supreme Lord in their life, then that is something that will immensely, immensely benefit them. And they, according to these words, they will achieve, that destination, that if one is able to remember the Lord. But in this Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is speaking particularly of himself, but all of these forms are ultimately, we can say, like the Das Avatar, they're different expansions, different avatars of Krishna. So it applies. And so we can say that also, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember there was another piece to your question there. There was another piece to your question. It was, so Krishna has these different incarnations. Oh, yes. Okay. So these incarnations are just attractive attributes of Krishna, just like a gem, like a jewel has so many different faces and so many different sides, and they all sparkle and gleam. So in that same way, these are all very attractive forms of the Supreme Lord. So if we have attraction to any of these forms of Krishna, the same benefit will be there. Krishna, we understand in our Hare Krishna movement and Krishna's teachings that he's the original form. He shares that Swayam Bhagavan. He's the original supreme form. Prabhupada in English gives the form the supreme personality of Godhead. But that doesn't mean that there are not other forms and other personalities of the Lord. So, and ultimately by hearing about these, our faith will be nourished. So it's not that we have to become sectarian. Oh, I'm a devotee of Lord Ram, and you're a devotee of Lord Krishna. So we have nothing to talk about, not like that at all. Because one nice example, it's in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. There's one personality named Gopa Kumar, and he ventures into the spiritual world and he meets Hanuman. And Hanuman, as we know, is the greatest devotee of Lord Ram. So, and Gopa Kumar is a devotee of Lord Krishna. So Gopa Kumar approaches Hanuman and says, can you please tell me about your Lord Ramachandra? And Hanuman shares very beautifully about Lord Ram, his devotion for Lord Ram. And at the end of that, Gopa Kumar says, Jai Shri Krishna, right? And then Hanuman says, tell me about Lord Krishna now. So Gopa Kumar shares the glories of Lord Krishna, his attraction to Lord Krishna. And at the end of that, Hanuman says, Jai Shri Ram. So in this way, our faith is nourished by hearing about these different appearances, different avatars of Lord Krishna. So that can help us to cultivate the remembrance like that. Thank you. Okay, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Radha Shama Sundar Dev ki jai, Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadramai ki jai, Shri Gauranitai ki jai, Shri Panchatattva ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Dinabandhu Prabhu ki jai. Haribol. 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 Haribol.
Everybody take this.
Please be seated. We have quick announcements. And we have cake cutting ceremony also. Sponsor. Your daughter is here. Is here? You can bring.
Hare Krishna. Please be seated. They won't serve prasadam. Please, everybody take your